My granddaughter banned me from her shop opening because she said I was too old for her trendy image. She forgot that I owned the building and that she hadn't paid rent in 90 days. When she humiliated me in front of her friends, I decided to stop acting like her grandmother and start acting like her landlord. I smoothed the lapel of my cream-colored tweed blazer. It was a vintage piece, tailored in Paris over 30 years ago. The fabric felt thick and substantial under my fingertips. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror one last time. My silver hair was pulled back in a neat, low bun, and I wore the pearl earrings my late husband, Robert, gave me for our 30th anniversary. I looked respectable. I looked proud. Tonight was a big night for my family. My granddaughter, Chloe, was opening her first business. I picked up the gift I had prepared. It was a heavy rectangular package wrapped in simple silver paper. Inside was a framed photograph of Chloe when she was 7 years old. In the picture, she stood behind a crooked cardboard box selling lemonade. I remembered that day clearly. She had made $12 and she was so excited she shouted. I wanted her to have it in her new office to remind her where she started. I walked out to my car. The evening air in Carlsbad was cool and smelled of salt from the nearby ocean. I drove slowly down the coast highway. I loved this city. I loved the way the palm trees lined the streets and how the sunset turned the water a deep, dark blue. I pulled my sedan onto State Street. The village was busy tonight. People walked on the sidewalks, holding ice cream cones and walking their dogs. I scanned the buildings as I drove. I knew every storefront on this block. I knew which roofs needed repairs and which tenants paid on time. I knew these things because I owned the buildings. Most people didn't know that. To the town, I was just Evelyn, a retired widow who spent her mornings gardening. I preferred it that way. I operated my real estate business through a series of boring-sounding companies. Kept life simple. It kept people from asking me for money. I saw Chloe's shop up ahead. It was called The Vibe. I parked my car around the corner and walked toward the noise. A heavy bass beat thumped against my chest. The storefront used to be an antique bookstore. Now the windows were covered in neon pink lights. A velvet rope blocked the entrance, and a large man in a black t-shirt stood guard with a clipboard. A crowd of young people gathered on the sidewalk. They held up their phones, recording themselves and the shop. They wore ripped jeans, oversized sunglasses, and sneakers that looked like spaceships. I adjusted my handbag and walked toward the velvet rope. The music was very loud. I could see through the open glass doors. Inside, the walls were painted a bright, stark white. There were no shelves, just a few racks of clothing in the center of the room. A DJ stood on a table in the back. I saw Chloe. She stood near the entrance, holding a glass of champagne. She looked beautiful. She wore a silk dress that matched the neon pink lights. She was laughing and talking to a girl with purple hair. I smiled and stepped up to the rope. "Excuse me," I said to the security guard. "I am here to see Chloe." The guard looked me up and down. He didn't smile. "Name?" "Evelyn," I said. "I am her grandmother." The guard looked over his shoulder. "Chloe," he shouted over the music. "Your grandma is here." Chloe stopped laughing. She turned her head and saw me. Her smile dropped instantly. She handed her champagne glass to the girl with purple hair and rushed over to the rope. She didn't open it. She leaned over the barrier, her face tight with stress. "Gran? What are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice was a sharp whisper. "I came to support you," I said, holding up the silver gift. "It is your grand opening. I am so proud of you." Chloe looked around nervously. She looked at the young people filming on their phones. She looked at her friends inside. Then she looked back at me. Her eyes were cold. "Gran, you can't be here," she said. "Look at you." I looked down at my suit. "Is something wrong?" "It's the whole thing," she said, waving her hand at me. "This is an influencer event. We are live streaming. The brand is about youth. It's about being fresh and cool. You are. You know. I am your grandmother," I said slowly. "Your old gran," she said. She didn't say it kindly. She said it like it was a disease. It ruins the aesthetic. If people see an old lady in a tweed suit standing around, they won't think the vibe is cool. They'll think it's a knitting circle. Please, just go home. My chest felt tight. I gripped the silver package harder. "I just wanted to wish you luck." "I don't need luck," she said. I need you to leave before anyone tags you in a story. Go. She turned her back on me. She signaled to the guard, and he crossed his arms, blocking my path completely. I stood there for a moment. The bass thumped in my ears. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It wasn't anger yet. It was pure embarrassment. I turned around and walked away from the lights. I moved into the shadows of the alley next to the building. I needed to catch my breath before I walked back to my car. I leaned against the brick wall. The rough texture scraped against my jacket. I took a deep breath of the salty air. Then I heard the side door open. It was just a few feet away from me. The music got louder for a second, then muffled again as the door clicked shut, but didn't latch completely. Oh my God, that was so awkward, I heard Chloe say. She must have stepped out for a cigarette or a break. Who was that? Another voice asked. A male voice. My grandmother, Chloe said. I heard the flick of a lighter. She tries, but she is so out of touch. She thinks she can just show up. Is she the one who gave you the money for the lease? The man asked. I froze. I listened closely. Chloe laughed. It was a mean, dry sound. No way. She's on a fixed income or something. No, I didn't pay for the lease. What do you mean? The landlord is some faceless corporation. Ocean View Holdings or something, Chloe said. She sounded proud. They are so disorganized. I haven't paid rent in 3 months. I just kept telling them the check was in the mail. They haven't done anything. Wait, really? Yeah, Chloe said. I used the rent money to hire the DJ and buy all the champagne. By the time they figure it out, I'll be famous. They can't evict a celebrity. It's genius. I stood very still in the dark. The cool evening air suddenly felt freezing. She hadn't just insulted me. She was stealing from me. Ocean View Holdings was my company. I was the disorganized landlord. I was the one who told my property manager to be lenient with the new tenant because I knew it was a young woman starting her first business. I didn't tell him it was my granddaughter because I wanted her to succeed on her own merits. I had held off the eviction notices. I had given her grace. And she used my money to buy champagne and hire a bouncer to keep me out. I pushed off the wall. I didn't go back to the front door. I walked straight to my car. I placed the silver gift on the passenger seat. I looked at it for a moment. The frame inside was worthless now. I started the engine. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I wasn't sad anymore. I checked my watch. It was 7:45 p.m. The night was still young. I pulled my phone out of my purse and dialed a number I knew by heart. Mr. Henderson, I said when he answered. I apologize for calling you on a Friday night. But we have a situation at the State Street property. Yes, the new boutique. I need you to meet me there. Bring the paperwork. I sat in the driver's seat of my sedan and locked the doors. The engine was off. The only light came from the street lamp above and the dashboard clock. It read 8:12 p.m. I waited. Outside, the bass from the club down the street thumped in a steady rhythm. It vibrated against the car window. I could hear the faint sound of cheering every time the door to the shop opened and closed. I pulled the rearview mirror toward me. I looked at my face. The skin around my eyes was soft and wrinkled, but my eyes were clear. I looked at my mouth. I looked too nice. I looked like the woman who let her granddaughter skip chores. I reached into my purse and found a tube of lipstick. It was a shade called brick red. I rarely wore it because it felt too severe for gardening or church. I applied the color carefully. I pressed my lips together and checked the edges. I put the tube back and snapped my purse shut. The sound was loud in the quiet car. I smoothed the front of my tweed blazer. I buttoned the top button. I sat up straighter. I was not Gran anymore. I was Evelyn Vance, the sole proprietor of Ocean View Holdings. Headlights swept across my windshield. A black car pulled up behind me and parked along the curb. The engine cut off. Mr. Henderson stepped out. He was a tall man in his 50s with thinning hair and a gray suit that looked expensive. He carried a thick leather briefcase. He looked out of place on this street full of teenagers, but he looked exactly right for me. I unlocked my door and stepped out. The air was colder now. I buttoned my jacket all the way up. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Henderson said. He nodded his head. He did not smile. He knew that if I called him on a Friday night, it was not for a social visit. Good evening, Arthur, I said. Do you have the file? I do, he said. He patted the briefcase. I have the lease agreement, the ledger showing the missing payments, and the 3-day notice to pay or quit. I also printed the eviction filing draft just in case. Good, I said. She is inside. The tenant? He asked. The tenant, I confirmed. She is currently hosting a party. She believes she has successfully avoided the landlord for 3 months. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses. Commercial leases are very specific, Mrs. Vance. If she is in default, we have the right to enter the premises, especially if we suspect damage to the property or illegal activity. She is serving alcohol, I said. I do not believe she has a liquor license. Mr. Henderson raised his eyebrows. That is a violation of Clause 14. We have grounds for immediate inspection. Then let's go, I said. We walked down the sidewalk side by side. My heels clicked on the concrete. His dress shoes made a dull thud. The music got louder with every step. I could feel the vibration in the soles of my feet. We reached the crowd. The line of people waiting to get in was longer now. They looked bored. They looked at their phones. When they saw me and Mr. Henderson, they stared. We looked like parents coming to shut down a house party. In a way, we were. We walked past the line directly to the velvet rope. The same large bouncer was there. He held his clipboard against his chest. When he saw me, he rolled his eyes. Lady, he groaned. I told you. You aren't on the list. Go home. He stepped in front of me. He looked at Mr. Henderson. You too, Pops. This isn't a retirement home. Mr. Henderson did not blink. He stepped forward right up to the rope. He pulled a business card from his pocket and held it up. I am Arthur Henderson, legal counsel for the property owner, he said. His voice was calm but very loud. Cut through the music. This is the owner, Mrs. Vance. We are conducting an emergency inspection of the premises. The bouncer looked at the card. He looked at me. He looked confused. The owner? Chloe said. Open the rope, Mr. Henderson said. He didn't ask. The bouncer hesitated. He looked back toward the glass doors. He clearly didn't know what to do. He unhooked the velvet rope and stepped aside. Thank you, I said. I walked through the door first. The change in atmosphere hit me instantly. The air inside was hot and humid. It smelled of cheap perfume, sweat, and warm champagne. The lights were dim, except for the flashing pink neon signs on the walls. The music was deafening. It wasn't just loud, it was physical. Pushed against my chest. The shop was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder holding plastic cups. They shouted over the noise. No one looked at the clothes on the racks. They were just standing there being seen. I pushed through the crowd. Mr. Henderson followed close behind me, using his briefcase to shield us. People bumped into me. A young man spilled his drink on my sleeve. He didn't apologize, he just turned away. I brushed the liquid off the tweed. It left a dark spot. I didn't care. I looked toward the back of the room. There was a small raised platform where the DJ table stood. The music lowered slightly. The DJ grabbed a microphone. Yo, 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 the DJ shouted. Give it up for the queen of the night. The founder of the vibe. Chloe. The crowd cheered. They held up their phones. The flashes of the cameras flickered like lightning. Chloe stepped up onto the platform. She held a microphone in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other. She looked radiant in the pink light. Her cheeks were flushed. She looked happy. Thank you guys so much, she screamed into the mic. Her voice echoed off the bare walls. This is literally a dream come true. I built this whole thing from scratch. No handouts. No help. Just me and my vision. The crowd screamed again. Self-made, someone shouted. I stood in the middle of the room about 20 feet away from the stage. I watched her. I listened to her lie. She stood on my floor. She burned my electricity. She drank champagne bought with my rent money. And she claimed she did it alone. They told me I was too young. Chloe shouted. They told me I didn't know business. But look at us now. We own this town. She raised the bottle high. Mr. Henderson leaned down to my ear. Shall I interrupt? He shouted over the noise. No, I said. I stared at Chloe. Let's get closer. I moved forward. The crowd was dense near the stage, but I used my elbows. I was not gentle. I pushed between two tall women in heels. I stepped in front of a man recording a video. I stopped right at the edge of the platform. I was so close I could see the sweat on Chloe's forehead. Chloe was basking in the applause. She looked down at the front row, expecting to see adoring fans. Instead, she saw me. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth stayed open, but the smile vanished. She lowered the bottle slowly. She looked at my face. She looked at the red lipstick. Then she looked at Mr. Henderson standing next to me with his briefcase. She didn't speak into the microphone, but the room was quiet enough for me to hear her voice crack. "Gran," she mouthed. I didn't smile. I stood with my hands clasped in front of me, perfectly still amidst the chaos of her party. I waited for her to make the next move. A high-pitched squeal cut through the air. Chloe had lowered the microphone too close to the speaker. The noise was sharp and painful. People in the front row covered their ears. Chloe winced, but she didn't put the microphone down. She looked at me, then at the crowd, and then back at me. Her face was red. The veins in her neck stood out. She looked desperate to keep control of the room. "Okay, everyone," she shouted. Her voice shook slightly. "Ignore the interruption. Just a little family drama. You know how it is when the older generation doesn't get the vibe." A few people laughed. It was a nervous, quiet sound. Most of them just stared at me and Mr. Henderson. We stood like statues in the middle of the dance floor. I didn't leave. I didn't look away. I looked straight at my granddaughter. Chloe's smile twitched. She gestured wildly with her free hand. "Gran, seriously. You need to go. Now. You are ruining the live stream." I took a step forward. "We need to talk, Chloe." My voice was not amplified, but I spoke from my diaphragm. The people near me heard it. They stepped back, creating a small circle of empty space around us. Chloe stomped her foot. The heel of her shoe made a hollow thud on the stage. "No. We are not talking. This is my night. Security." She pointed at the large bouncer who was still standing by the door. He looked at her, then pushed his way through the crowd. He moved fast. He looked annoyed that he had to work. He reached the circle. He towered over me. "Ma'am," he said. "I tried to be nice outside. You need to exit the building." He reached out and grabbed my upper arm. His fingers dug into the fabric of my vintage blazer. His grip was firm. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. It was not fear. It was indignation. No one had touched me without my permission in 40 years. Before I could pull away, Mr. Henderson moved. He didn't shout. He stepped forward and placed his hand directly on the bouncer's wrist. Mr. Henderson was smaller than the guard, but his grip looked like iron. "Remove your hand from her person," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was flat and cold. Immediately, the bouncer looked down at Mr. Henderson. "Get off me, Pops. The owner told me to toss her." "The girl on the stage is not the owner," Mr. Henderson said. He dropped the bouncer's wrist and held up his briefcase. "She is the tenant, and she is currently in violation of her lease. If you touch Mrs. Vance again, you will be liable for assault on a property owner." The bouncer froze. He looked at Chloe. "Chloe? Is that true?" Chloe's face went pale. The pink lights reflected off her skin, making her look sickly. She gripped the microphone with both hands. "He's lying." Chloe screamed into the mic, "Get them out. They're crazy." The DJ cut the music. The silence that followed was sudden and heavy. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the back and the heavy breathing of the crowd. Every phone in the room was pointed at the stage. The influencers stopped posing and started recording the real drama. I brushed the sleeve of my jacket where the guard had touched me. I looked at the bouncer. "You are dismissed," I said to him. He looked at me. He looked at the expensive cut of Mr. Henderson's suit. He looked at Chloe, who was trembling on the stage with a bottle of warm champagne. He made a choice. He stepped back and crossed his arms. "I'm not getting sued for this," the bouncer muttered. I turned my attention back to the stage. The path was clear now. I walked toward the short staircase that led up to the platform. My knees ached slightly, but I didn't let it show in my walk. I held the railing and ascended the 3 steps. I stood on the platform eye to eye with Chloe. Up close, I saw the details I had missed from the floor. Her makeup was smudged. Her eyes were wide and wet. She looked very young. She looked like the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee. But she wasn't a little girl. She was a business owner who had humiliated me publicly. "Gran, please," she whispered. She didn't use the microphone this time. "Everyone is watching. Just go. We can talk tomorrow. I'll pay you back. I swear." "You had 3 months to talk," I said. "You had 90 days to pay." "I needed the money for the launch," she hissed. "I had to look successful to be successful. You don't understand marketing." "I understand arithmetic," I said. "And I understand respect." Chloe glared at me. Her embarrassment turned into something ugly. She raised the microphone again. She wanted to use the crowd as a weapon one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice shrill and loud. "I am so sorry. My grandmother is a little confused. She thinks she runs things. It's really sad. We deal with this at home all the time." A gasp went through the room. She was calling me senile. She was using my age to dismiss my authority. I looked at the crowd. I saw their faces. Some looked amused. Some looked pitying. They thought I was a confused old woman wandering into a party. I felt a calm settle over me. It was the same calm I felt before I signed $1 million contract. It was the clarity of the deal. I reached out and took the microphone from Chloe's hand. She was so surprised she let go without a fight. I held the cold metal in my hand. I turned to face the room. The feedback squealed for a second, then settled. I waited for the echo to die down. I looked at the cameras. I looked at the faces. I was ready to introduce myself. I held the microphone tight. The metal was warm from Chloe's hand. I looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of eyes stared back at me. The lights from their phone cameras blinded me for a second, but I didn't blink. I took a breath. The air tasted like dust and cheap cologne. "My name is Evelyn Vance," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers. It was deep and steady. "I am Chloe's grandmother. But that is not why I am here tonight." Chloe reached for my arm. "Gran, stop," she hissed. "Don't do this." I turned my shoulder, blocking her out. I kept my eyes on the audience. "Chloe told you I was confused," I continued. "She told you I was old. She told you I didn't belong here because I didn't fit the brand image. She was right about one thing. I am old. I have lived long enough to know how business works." I paused. I let the silence fill the room. I saw a girl in the front row lower her phone slightly. She looked curious. "I am not here as a grandmother," I said. "I am here as the owner of Ocean View Holdings. I am the owner of this building. I own the floor you are standing on. I own the walls you painted white. I own the roof over your heads." A murmur went through the crowd. People looked at each other. They whispered. The cameras didn't stop recording. They zoomed in on my face. I turned to Chloe. She stood frozen. Her mouth was a thin line. Her hands shook at her sides. "You told these people you were a self-made woman," I said to her. I spoke into the microphone so everyone could hear every word. "You said you built this alone. But you didn't mention the lease." "Gran." Chloe's voice broke. Tears started to pool in her eyes. "You signed a contract, Chloe," I said. "You agreed to pay rent on the 1st of every month. It is now the 22nd of the 3rd month. You have paid nothing." The crowd gasped. It was a loud collective sound. I saw the influencers turn their phones toward Chloe. They captured her reaction. They captured her shame. "You spent the rent money on this party," I said, sweeping my arm toward the neon lights in the DJ booth. "You bought champagne instead of security. You bought followers instead of a future." Chloe started to cry. It wasn't a pretty cry. Her face twisted. Black mascara ran down her cheeks. "You're ruining everything," she screamed. "How could you do this to me?" "I didn't do this," I said calmly. "You did this when you decided I wasn't important enough to respect. You thought I was just a confused old woman. You forgot that the confused old woman holds the deed." I looked over the heads of the crowd. I nodded to Mr. Henderson. He walked up the stairs. His movements were stiff and formal. He placed his briefcase on the DJ table. He snapped the latches open. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot in the quiet room. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. He walked over to Chloe. He didn't look at her tears. He looked at her hands. "Chloe Vance," Mr. Henderson said. His voice picked up on the microphone I was holding. "On behalf of Ocean View Holdings, I am serving you with a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. You have 72 hours to pay the full balance of $12,000, or eviction proceedings will begin immediately." He held out the envelope. Chloe didn't take it. She stared at it. Her hands stayed at her sides. Mr. Henderson didn't wait. He pressed the envelope against her chest. She instinctively grabbed it to keep it from falling. She held the legal document against her pink silk dress. The contrast was stark. "The party is over," I said into the microphone. "Please vacate the premises." Immediately, I placed the microphone on the DJ table next to the briefcase. A loud feedback screech made everyone jump. I walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me. They moved fast. No one wanted to be in my way. I walked through the center of the room with my head high. I heard the whispers as I passed. "That was brutal," a boy said. "She owns the building," a girl asked. "That's crazy. Did you get that on video?" someone else asked. "Post it. Now." I didn't look back at the stage. I didn't look at Chloe sobbing in the pink light. I walked to the front door. The bouncer was already gone. He had abandoned his post the moment the legal papers came out. The velvet rope lay on the ground. Mr. Henderson joined me on the sidewalk. We stood together and watched the people file out. They came out in a rush, holding their plastic cups, laughing and talking about the drama. They typed on their phones as they walked. They were already uploading the story of Chloe's failure. Within 10 minutes, the shop was empty. The music was off. The only light came from the neon sign in the window that buzzed softly. Inside, I saw Chloe sitting on the edge of the stage. She was alone. Her friends had left with the crowd. The girl with the purple hair was gone. The DJ was packing up his equipment in the back, ignoring her. Chloe held the envelope in her lap. She looked small. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Shall I lock the front door, Mrs. Vance?" "No," I said. I watched my granddaughter through the glass. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Leave it unlocked. She needs to pack her things." I turned away from the window. The adrenaline was fading. My legs felt heavy. My feet hurt in my heels. "Good night, Arthur," I said. "Thank you for coming." "Good night, Evelyn," he said. He tipped his head. He walked to his black car and drove away. I stood alone on the sidewalk. The ocean air was cold now. I pulled my blazer tighter around me. I looked at the framed photo of Chloe selling lemonade that still sat on the passenger seat of my car. I felt a heavy ache in my chest. It wasn't regret. I knew I did the right thing, but it still hurt to watch a lesson being learned. The next morning, my house was very quiet. I woke up at 6 o'clock, just like I did every day. I put on my robe and walked to the kitchen. I ground coffee beans. The machine whirred loudly for 10 seconds, then stopped. The smell of dark roast filled the room. I poured a cup and walked out to the back patio. The sun was just coming up over the fence. The grass was wet with dew. I sat in my wicker chair and looked at my garden. The hydrangeas were blooming. The large blue heads bobbed slightly in the breeze. It was peaceful. It was hard to believe that 5 miles away, I had destroyed a business. My phone sat on the glass table next to my coffee cup. It buzzed. Then it buzzed again. A steady vibration against the glass. Picked it up. I had 34 missed messages. Most were from numbers I didn't know. One was from my neighbor, Susan. "Saw you on TikTok," the text read. "You look fierce. Good for you." I opened the internet browser. I didn't have the apps Chloe used, but I didn't need them. The video was on the front page of the local news site. The headline read, "Carlsbad landlord serves eviction at opening party." I pressed play. The video was shaky. It showed me standing on the stage, holding the microphone. The audio was clear. I heard my own voice booming over the speakers. "You forgot that the confused old woman holds the deed." I scrolled down to the comments. I expected people to be angry. I expected them to call me cruel. "Grandma is a savage," one comment said. "Pay your rent or get out." "Simple," said another. "Does she need another granddaughter?" I pay my bills. I put the phone down. I didn't feel savage. I felt tired. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot and bitter. At 9 o'clock, a car door slammed in my driveway. I heard footsteps stomping up the walkway. The front door flew open. I hadn't locked it. Chloe stood in the hallway. She looked terrible. She wore gray sweatpants and a stained oversized hoodie. Her hair was pulled up in a messy knot. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked like a teenager again. "Are you happy?" she screamed. Her voice cracked. I stood up from the kitchen table. "Good morning, Chloe. Would you like some coffee?" "I don't want coffee," she yelled. She threw her purse onto the sofa. It hit the cushions with a heavy thud. "I want my life back. Do you know what you did? I have lost 3,000 followers since last night. People are commenting on my photos with clown emojis. They are calling me a fraud." "You committed fraud," I said. I walked to the counter and poured a glass of water. "You signed a lease you couldn't afford. You lied to your investors. You lied to me." I placed the glass of water on the table in front of her. She didn't touch it. She paced around the kitchen. Her sneakers squeaked on the tile floor. "It was a marketing strategy," she argued. She threw her hands up. "I was going to pay you back next week. The launch was going to bring in sales. But you killed it. You killed the brand before we sold a single dress. You killed the brand when you banned your landlord from the building," I said. "I didn't know it was you," she shouted. "That makes it worse," I said. I leaned against the counter. "If it had been a stranger, would you have treated them better? If a random elderly woman walked up to your door, would you have mocked her? Would you have told security to remove her?" Chloe stopped pacing. She looked at the floor. She picked at a loose thread on her hoodie. She didn't answer. "You judged me," I said. "You looked at my gray hair and my tweed jacket, and you decided I had no value. You decided I was disposable. You thought you could use my property without paying because you thought the owner was stupid. It turns out the owner was just patient." Chloe sniffed. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. "So what now? Are you really kicking me out?" "The notice is legal," I said. "You have 3 days to pay the full balance. $12,000. "I don't have it," she whispered. "I spent it all on the party. On the DJ. On the influencers." "Then you have to vacate," I said. "You need to remove your inventory. You need to clean the space. You need to hand over the keys." Chloe looked up at me. Her eyes were wet again. "But Gran, it's my dream." "Dreams cost money," I said. "And respect costs nothing. You ran out of both." She stared at me for a long time. She was waiting for me to break. She was waiting for the grandmother who baked cookies and wrote checks for birthday parties. She wanted me to pull out my checkbook and fix it. I crossed my arms. I didn't move. Chloe let out a sharp breath. She grabbed her purse from the sofa. "Fine," she said. "Fine. Take the stupid building. I don't want it anyway. It's cursed." She turned and marched to the door. She grabbed the handle and yanked it open. The bright morning light flooded into the hallway. "I'm never speaking to you again," she said. She didn't look back. She slammed the door. The frame rattled. The sound echoed through the empty house. I stood in the kitchen. The silence rushed back in. I looked at the glass of water I had poured for her. The bubbles clung to the side of the glass. It was untouched. I walked over to the sink and poured the water down the drain. I rinsed the glass and put it in the dishwasher. I wiped the counter with a sponge. I moved in slow, deliberate circles. I was alone in my big house. My granddaughter hated me. My family was broken. But my phone buzzed again on the table. It was a text from Mr. Henderson. "The lockbox has been installed," it said. "I have 3 inquiries for the space already. One is a local potter. She pays 6 months in advance." I looked out at the garden. The wind had picked up. The hydrangea bushes swayed, but their roots held firm. They were strong. They had weathered storms before. I put the phone in my pocket. I went back outside to prune the roses. 72 hours passed. The deadline on the legal notice expired at midnight on Monday. I didn't sleep well that night, but I didn't check my phone either. On Tuesday morning, I drove to State Street. I parked in the same spot I used on the night of the party. The street was quiet. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, So the teenagers were in school and the tourists were still at breakfast. I walked up to the storefront. The neon lights were gone. The windows were dark. A piece of white paper was taped to the inside of the glass. In messy black marker it read, "Closed." I pulled my key ring from my purse. I found the brass key for the front door. I slid it into the lock. Turned with a stiff click. I pushed the door open. The bell above the door chimed. It was a cheerful sound that didn't match the room. The shop was empty. The racks of clothes were gone. The DJ table was gone. The pink lights were gone. But the smell remained. The air was stale. It smelled of spilled alcohol and cheap vanilla perfume. I walked into the center of the room. My heels clicked loudly on the hardwood floor. I looked down. The wood was scratched. There were long, jagged white lines where heavy equipment had been dragged across the varnish. I looked at the walls. Chloe had painted them a stark, bright white. Now, there were holes in the drywall where she had mounted her signs. Plastic anchors stuck out of the plaster like broken teeth. In the corner I saw a pile of trash. Empty cardboard boxes, plastic wrap, and a broken hanger. I walked to the back counter. I ran my finger across the surface. It came away gray with dust. She hadn't cleaned. She had just taken what she wanted and left the mess for me. I felt a heavy weight in my stomach. It wasn't anger anymore. It was disappointment. I had hoped she would at least sweep the floor. I had hoped she would show some pride, even in defeat. The front door chimed again. I turned around. Mr. Henderson walked in. He held the door open for a young woman. She was not like Chloe. She wore dark denim overalls covered in gray smudges. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. She carried a heavy canvas bag over one shoulder. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Henderson said. His voice echoed in the empty space. "This is Maya. She is the artist I mentioned." Maya stepped forward. She wiped her hands on her thighs before she extended her right hand. Her fingernails were short and clean, but her skin looked dry and rough. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Vance," Maya said. Her voice was calm. She had a firm handshake. "Mr. Henderson told me a lot about the building's history. Did he tell you about the previous tenant?" I asked. Maya looked around the room. She saw the scratches on the floor. She saw the holes in the wall. "He mentioned it became available suddenly. I can see there is some work to do." "Are you afraid of work?" I asked. Maya smiled. It was a genuine smile. It created crinkles around her eyes. "I'm a potter, ma'am. I throw wet clay for 10 hours a day. I'm not afraid of a little spackle and paint." I nodded. I liked her answer. "Show me your plan," I said. Maya reached into her canvas bag. She didn't pull out a phone or a tablet. She pulled out a leather-bound notebook. She opened it to a page marked with a blue ribbon. She showed me a sketch. It was drawn in pencil. It showed the room filled with wooden shelves. In the center there were 2 pottery wheels. In the back a small area for glazing. "I want to build the shelves myself," Maya said, pointing to the drawing. "I use reclaimed wood. It's sturdy. I want people to see the process. I want them to watch me make the bowls and mugs they buy." "It will be dusty," I noted. "Yes," she said. "But it will be real. People like to see how things are made. They like to know it takes time." I looked at the sketch again. It was detailed. She had measured the floor plan. She knew exactly where the electrical outlets were. "And the rent?" I asked. "It is not cheap to be on State Street." Maya closed the notebook. She reached into her bag again. She pulled out a paper envelope. "I have a cashier's check for the first month, the last month, and the security deposit," she said. She handed me the envelope. "I saved it from selling at the farmer's market for 3 years. I'm not asking for credit." I took the envelope. Felt thick. I opened the flap and looked at the check. The numbers were correct. The bank logo was legitimate. I looked at Maya. She stood straight. She looked me in the eye. She wasn't trying to impress me with her outfit or her vocabulary. She was treating this as a business transaction. She respected my building and she respected my time. "The scratches on the floor," I said, pointing down. "They are deep." "I have a sander," Maya said. "I can refinish them this weekend. I prefer a matte finish anyway. It hides the clay dust better." I looked at Mr. Henderson. He gave me a small nod. I looked back at the white walls. I imagined them filled with wooden shelves. I imagined the smell of wet earth instead of stale champagne. I imagined a shop where things were built, not just displayed. Mr. Henderson has the lease in his briefcase, I said. We can sign it on the counter. Maya's shoulders relaxed. She let out a long breath. Thank you. You won't regret this. We walked to the back of the shop. Mr. Henderson laid out the papers on the dusty counter. Maya read every page. She asked 2 questions about the water line for her sink. Then she signed her name in blue ink. I signed next to her. Mr. Henderson handed her a set of keys. Welcome to State Street, he said. Maya held the keys in her palm. She closed her fingers over them tight. I'm going to start measuring for the shelves right now, she said. I will leave you to it, I said. I walked back toward the front door. I stopped at the entrance and looked back. Maya was already kneeling on the floor with a yellow tape measure. She was humming a quiet song. She didn't look at her phone. She was already working. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The sun was high now. The street was busier. A woman walked by with a stroller. I looked at the glass window one last time. I reached up and peeled the tape off the closed sign. The paper came away easily. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I felt the corner of the cashier's check in my other pocket. It was a piece of paper just like the eviction notice had been. But this one felt lighter. I walked to my car. I didn't turn on the radio. I drove with the windows down. I thought about Chloe. I wondered where she was. I wondered if she was blaming me, or if she was finally looking at herself in the mirror. I hoped she would find her own way just like Maya had. But I knew I couldn't buy the map for her anymore. 6 months passed. It was a Tuesday in late October, and the air in Carlsbad was crisp. The tourists were gone, leaving the village to the locals. I parked my car in my usual spot and walked down State Street. I stopped in front of the storefront that used to be the Vibe. The neon signs were long gone. The windows were clean and clear. A wooden sign hung above the door. It read, Maya's Clay Studio. Through the glass, I saw shelves made of reclaimed barn wood. They were stacked high with bowls, mugs, and vases in shades of blue and gray. A woman stood by the window, holding a mug and examining the handle. She turned it over to look at the price. She nodded and carried it to the counter. I pushed the door open. The bell chimed. The smell hit me immediately. It didn't smell like stale champagne anymore. It smelled of wet earth, dried lavender, and warm kiln heat. Maya sat at the wheel in the center of the room. She wore the same denim overalls, now stained with months of gray clay. She was teaching a class. 3 other women sat at wheels next to her, their hands covered in mud, laughing as they tried to center the clay. Maya looked up and saw me. She wiped her hands on a towel and stood up. Good morning, Mrs. Vance, she said. She smiled. Her face was bare, and her ponytail was messy. She looked tired, but she looked content. Good morning, Maya, I said. The shop looks busy. It is, she said. The weekend workshops are sold out until Christmas. People really like making their own gifts. She walked to the back counter. She opened a drawer and pulled out a white envelope. She handed it to me. Rent, she said. And I added the extra $50 for the water usage we discussed. The kiln uses a lot of water for cleaning. I took the envelope. I didn't need to open it to know the check was correct. Maya was never late. She never made excuses. She treated the building with care. Last week, she had even fixed a loose tile in the bathroom herself. Thank you, Maya, I said. How is the floor holding up? Perfect, she said, looking down at the sanded wood. The matte finish is great. No scratches. I put the envelope in my purse. I will let you get back to your students. Would you like a cup of tea? She offered. I just made a pot in the back. Not today, I said. I need some coffee this morning. I waved goodbye to the students and walked out. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the building. The brickwork looked solid. The new tenant was thriving. The investment was secure. I walked 2 blocks down the street toward the ocean. I needed a caffeine fix. There was a trendy coffee chain on the corner of Grand Avenue. It was popular with the younger crowd. I walked inside. The line was long. I stood behind a man in a wetsuit. The music playing was soft jazz, not thumping bass. The menu on the wall listed drinks with names I didn't understand, full of syrups and oat milk. I waited for 5 minutes. Finally, I reached the counter. "Welcome to the daily grind. What can I get for you?" The voice was familiar. It was flat and rehearsed. I looked up. Chloe stood behind the register. She wore a green apron over a black t-shirt. Her hair was tied back tightly in a regulation bun. She wasn't wearing the pink silk dress. She wore comfortable black shoes with non-slip soles. She looked at the register screen, her finger hovering over the buttons. She didn't look at me at first. "I would like a small black coffee, please," I said. Chloe froze. Her fingers stopped mid-air. She lifted her head slowly. Our eyes met. She looked different. The arrogance was gone from her face. In its place was exhaustion. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her fingernails were short and unpolished. She looked like someone who stood on her feet for 8 hours a day. She stared at me. I saw her throat move as she swallowed. She looked at my tweed blazer. She looked at the pearls in my ears. For a second I thought she might say something. I thought she might ask to come home. I thought she might ask for money. But she didn't. She looked at the line of people behind me. She looked at her manager, who was steaming milk at the espresso machine. She took a breath. "That will be $2.50, she said. Her voice was quiet. I opened my purse. I pulled out a $5 bill. I placed it on the counter. "Keep the change," I said. Chloe looked at the money. She hesitated. Then she picked up the bill. "Thank you," she whispered. She grabbed a paper cup. She turned to the brewer behind her. She poured the coffee. Her hand shook slightly, but she didn't spill a drop. She put a lid on the cup and set it on the counter. "Have a nice day," she said. It was the script she had to use. "You too," I said. I picked up the cup. It was hot against my palm. I turned and walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see her reaction. I knew what she was feeling. She was learning the value of $1. She was learning that work was hard. I stepped outside into the sunshine. I walked over to a bench that faced the ocean and sat down. I took a sip of the coffee. It was strong and hot. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number. "Mr. Henderson," I said when he answered. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," he replied. "Did you collect the rent from the pottery studio?" "I did," I said. "Maya's doing well. But I am calling about the coffee shop on Grand Avenue. The Daily Grind." "Yes, Mrs. Vance. I just stopped in for a coffee," I said. I noticed the air conditioning vent in the ceiling above the counter is rattling. "It looks loose. We should send a maintenance crew to fix it. I don't want it to fall on the employees." "I will add it to the list," Mr. Henderson said. "That building is due for an inspection anyway. The commercial lease for the coffee franchise renews next year." "Good," I said. "Make sure they are happy. They have a new barista who seems very promising." "I will make a note of it," he said. "Anything else?" "No, Arthur. That is all." I hung up the phone. I held the warm cup in both hands. Chloe was working hard. She was earning a paycheck. And every month, her boss sent a rent check to a holding company called Pacific Trust LLC. She didn't know that Pacific Trust was just another name for Evelyn Vance. She didn't know that she was paying rent to me indirectly every time she sold a latte. She thought she had escaped my world. She thought she was independent now. She didn't understand that in this town, if you looked deep enough, you eventually found my signature on the deed. I took another sip of coffee. It tasted better than usual. Cool was fleeting. Trendy lasted for a season. But brick and mortar lasted forever. I watched the waves crash against the shore. I checked my watch. It was time to go home and water the roses.